Hey folks, welcome back to the Paramedic channel. My name is Justin. Today is January 21st, 2024, and it's a sad day here in Oklahoma. Obviously, you know, this channel has a big emphasis on medical helicopters, especially the safety culture and, you know, kind of learning about the previous crashes and stuff like that. Well, we had a terrible fatal crash last night with Evac Lifeteam, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Obviously, there's not much that we know right now, but I'll tell you what we do know, so stick around. Now, this crash involved the operator Evac Lifeteam, which I'm sure if you're in the United States, most people know about. That's actually where I got started, and I worked as a flight paramedic for them back in 2010, 2011, and not too far from where this accident took place. Evac is, was originally part of like Air Medical Group Holdings, and now they're under the umbrella of Global Medical Response, otherwise known as GMR. And in the grand scheme of things, I mean, they're one of the safest companies that exist. They have so many helicopters, so many bases, mostly across the Midwest part of the country. And, while they have had accidents in the past, I mean, the amount of flights they have, they're a safe company. They are. I couldn't tell you for sure, but I think, you know, there's over a dozen or somewhere around a dozen bases just here in Oklahoma. They obviously specialize in rural EMS. And one thing about Evac Lifeteam is that they kind of took the Southwest Airlines approach, you know, maybe when they were growing, where they stuck to one airframe model, and they really stuck with the 206, having hundreds of them in their fleet. Up until a few years ago, and they started upgrading them to Bell 407s, and they even have some EC-130s in their fleet now. And just here in Oklahoma, down in Pauls Valley, they recently put an EC-135, fully IFR capable aircraft, and they've actually done IFR flights in the state. So they're definitely stepping it up and putting the money in. But this accident that happened today was a Bell 206 L3. What does the L3 mean? I mean, it's a long ranger, but the most updated version is an L4. But really, the L4 has over the L3 is a beefier transmission. It can haul a couple hundred more pounds, and that's really it. It's a very reliable aircraft. I mean, it has that Allison 250 turbine engine, which is arguably one of the safest and most reliable helicopter turbine engines that's ever been produced. The helicopter itself, a Bell 206, I mean, it's not really the time right now to argue about which aircraft is best or whatever for air ambulances. But so some people pick on the Bell 206 and say that it's underpowered or it's not right for helicopter EMS. And I'm not going to say whether it is or it isn't. But what I can say is that the Bell 206 is one of the safest aircraft that's ever been built. They've made thousands and thousands of these aircraft over the last 40 or 50 years. And just statistically, it's one of the safest aircraft that's out there. So before anybody jumps to conclusions and says, well, it's a Bell 206, that doesn't really mean anything. It's a super safe aircraft. But nonetheless, let's dive in and take a look at a local news story and just see what they reported on.
The NTSB is now investigating a deadly helicopter crash here in Oklahoma.
So according to a Facebook post from Air Evac Lifeteam,
Yep.
A medical helicopter was returning to their base in Weatherford after a patient transport in OKC. And around 11:30 last night, the control center lost contact with them. Law enforcement assisted in finding that crash site. Officials say 3 crew members.
I mean, I also had some sources tell me that several other Air Evac helicopters also were dispatched to look for it and couldn't find it. And I do believe that law enforcement played a big role in finding the crash site.
Members on board died. We are working to learn some more information. The victims' names have not been released.
So that is true. The victims' names have not been released, and although I do know the names of all three, I'm not going to release them. That's for sure. But I will tell you that I did know one of the crew members on board, a local person, and I will tell you that I'm absolutely heartbroken, not just for that fatality, but for all three. So the pilot, the nurse, and the paramedic, all three of them did die. And there were some a couple aerial shots that were taken. This is probably the clearest one. I mean, it's hard to make out much from here. We'll look at the pathway in a minute, but obviously you can see the aircraft sitting there. It was a little bit of a post-impact fire, but you can tell that it didn't consume the entire aircraft. You can see the patient litter. That's what that looks like right there. It almost looks like the med kit and everything is still strapped to it. We can see the very tip of the tail boom over here with the tail rotor still attached, and some other debris. One thing that, kind of stands out to me in this photo is the lack of a trail, leading up to where the helicopter stopped. I don't know if that means anything, but whether or not they fell right out of the sky or were circling or something like that. The other photo that does kind of jump out is, the Bell 206 has these giant twin blades. Obviously, this blade is quite a bit further away from the aircraft, from the rest of the wreckage. And they did crash out in the field. You can see the intersection here. But let's take a look at the flight path, and we'll kind of go from there. So if you pull up the ADSB information, right out here in Weatherford, you can see just by this airport right here is the Weatherford Hospital. Air Evac's pretty big about stationing a lot of their rural bases at small rural hospitals, which is, it's a good thing. You get relationships with the hospitals and stuff like that. And they probably transport a lot of patients out of this hospital in Weatherford. And you can see right here, it has their base number, which is 122. It's I don't want to say fairly new, but it's one of the newer bases in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's had a lot of bases over the years, but Weatherford is somewhat of a newer addition. Anyway, you can see that they left the airport and left going southeast down to the city of Anadarko. Anadarko is also a very rural area in the middle of nowhere. And then, as you can see, as you zoom in on Anadarko, that they obviously landed here at this hospital called the Physicians Hospital in Anadarko. So obviously this was a hospital to transfer, picking up a patient in Anadarko. They take off to the south, turn around north, and they head here to Oklahoma City, which is obviously a big metro area. And I'm down here in downtown Oklahoma City, and they went up here to either Mercy Hospital or Oklahoma Heart North Hospital. They kind of both share the same sort of landing pad that was built out here in a parking lot. And so this is Mercy Hospital here, and then Heart Hospital is to the east right here. Both of them, Mercy is where you could take somebody who's having a really, really bad stroke and needs neurosurgery. They're a top neurosurgery center in the area. And then the Heart Hospital here is one of the top PCI facilities where they can take care of, acute heart attacks and stuff like that. So I have no idea what was wrong with the patient, but those are obviously high acuity hospitals. And even though, just kind of food for thought, even though there's a big H here where there is a heliport, nobody lands there because I'll try to pull up another picture and kind of tie it in here in a second. But nobody lands there because it's kind of down in between the buildings, and it's very unsafe. So many years ago, we would just land here in this field, and then an ambulance has to take you across the street. Even though you're landing at a hospital, you'd still have to transfer the patient over to an ambulance, literally, to drive you from this side of the parking lot to this side of the parking lot. And that happened so many times that they just built a new heliport right there. So anyway, so you can see that they landed at this heliport coming in, landing to the south. The winds were obviously out of the south all night. I'll talk a little bit about the weather in a second, but they landed here. They were on the ground for 45 minutes, it looks like, and off they took again, taking off to the south and headed home, presumably. And it's kind of a straight shot. You kind of track their path coming across here. Bell 206, kind of a slow aircraft. It's flying at 110 knots, and then you can watch them kind of fly like due west, and they fly over Yukon and El Reno, and they're getting this is the middle of nowhere. I mean, there's nothing out there but oil fields and farmland on their way to Weatherford, and they're probably flying at about 800-900 feet above the ground, which is perfectly normal. And you can see they're headed back to either the airport there to get fuel, or just back to their base at the hospital. And then their transponder starts kind of going in and out right here. Oftentimes with these helicopter crashes, you see something happens, and then there's evasive maneuvers, and they're making turns and stuff. And these guys are they're just flying straight, and they kind of just stop transponding. It doesn't really show them descending or anything like that. But then this is, the location that you saw in the other photos that were over here. And, they fell out of sky, and all three of these folks lost their lives. So again, like I said, I'm absolutely heartbroken for them. It's a very tight community here. Everybody knows everybody. I mean, Oklahoma's a small state with small cities, and stuff like this really hits close to home. But I did want to talk a little bit about the weather, even though I don't think it really was a factor. It was clear last night. The winds, like I said, were out of the south, and even though it can get really windy here, it wasn't that windy last night, and it was very clear. But what it was cold, and we have had, just like half the Midwest part of the country, we have had these record colds where it's been 0 degrees and 5 degrees, and I think last night it was in the 20s. Which is perfectly fine and perfectly safe for the aircraft. I mean, to me, it doesn't seem like there's any reason why they shouldn't have been flying. And so to speculate beyond anything beyond that, I'm certainly not going to do that. Where we're at right now is we have a safe aircraft with good folks on board, and the flight crew, the med crew at least, were pretty new folks, but they certainly knew what they were doing. A safe company is tragic, to say the least. That's all we have for now, and I'll keep you posted as time goes on. Keep these folks in your thoughts, and send them all your love. And it's happening too often. But hopefully we'll find a way to learn from this and move on like we do. Thanks.